back in the embassy and said, we're going to get you out quick, you've got to get home quick. So they said, well, you ain't got time to pack her in it, you'd have to get back to England. And one said, well, I can't take it, I'm going to take my pet spider. For years I've kept him, and I'm going to take him home. And I said, well, are you going to get him through the customs? He said, well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to feed it up, it's a bird-eating spider, give it a bird, put it on with a pail, and it'll sit there and it'll think it's a brooch. So that's a good idea. So then they said the other one, well, you've got a big boa constrictor. I said, I'm not leaving him. What I'll do, I'll slim him a bit, put him through the loops of my jeans, put his tail in his mouth, and he'll think it's a snakeskin belt. Well, what a wonderful idea. Then they looked at the third girl, said, how are you going to go on? She said, well, I'm not going to leave him. They said, well, you've got a South American skunk. She said, no. She said, well, how are you going to get him through the customs? She said, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put him down my knickers. He said, Christ, what about the smoke? She said, well, if it dies, it dies. China. And he had a friend, he was a Scotsman, of course, you know, the big tight, and what he done, he does not all of them, not all of them. And this Scotsman had his ensuite bathroom shower, the lot done. Wonderful job. Well, no, a couple of nights later, he rang him up, he said, what do you want, Jock? He said, well, you know, you've done all the lovely job, he said, but the wife, he said, she was trying it out, you know, had a shower, a full job, he said, but she sort of slipped, and she somehow landed just outside the shower on the tile floor, and, you know, she was straight out the shower naked, and she's like, had done the splits, like, and she was like suckered to the floor. He said, could you come round and help me pick her up? So he said, well, I'll be round, Jock. Yeah, go on. He went round. Well, I got her, get her arms like, couldn't pick her up at all. She was screaming. It's nearly trying to pick the floor up. So, and the scratching the head. He says, Christ, I don't know what I'm going to do. He said, well, there's only one thing I can see, Jock, what we're going to do. We've got to smash a tile to, like, release the vacuum. You know, you have to think of one of them arrows where they used to shoot the Anyway, he says, oh dear, he says, are you sure that's all you can do? He says, yes. Can't think of anything else. He says, go on then. So he goes round home for his lump hammer. And he goes back again, and as he goes back, there's old Jock leaning over his wife, playing with knockers, whistling in his ear, scratching the neck. He says, Christ, we ain't got time for all that. What's the matter with you? He said, well, while you were gone, he said, I thought, you know, if I could get her going and get her a bit damp, I could slide her across to the kitchen because the tiles ain't too expensive. Now, you won't believe this, I've been had a request, there's these two, please. And they used to go on holiday every year. The first three were there one year, and they had a good holiday. The next year, the first three there, the end of the pair, laying on his desk chair, waiting for his mate, and he's getting a bit worried for him. Well, it's just getting a bit dark, and his mate, you can see him coming down the pier. And there he is, he's wet through his ears, all up in the air, he's got his little suitcase, and he gets down his way, he says, where have you been? He says, well, what is it? He said, I've got here, he says, but I've come up in my man's moustache, and he's come up the M6 on his motorbike. He said, I'm freezing in that. Oh, he said, his mate said, you want to do what I do next year? He said, what's that? He said, well, before they come away, you know they're going to come the next day. He said, you jump on the woman's foot, go right up her leg, he says, a little pair of pants there, drop in the lagger. He said, a little patchy with her, he said, it's ever so warm, that's how I get there. He says, right, he said, I'll remember that next year. Well, they had a cracking holiday, like they always did. He said, now, I'll see you next year, don't forget what I've told you, he said, right. Next year, the first place there on the end of the pier on his deck chair, and he's, where the hell's my mate again? Well, then he sees him a bit like coming down the pier, wet through his head all over there, got the thing trembling. Christ, he said, what's the matter with you? Didn't you remember what I told you last year? He said, I didn't, where I went wrong. He said, well, last night, like you told me, before they went bed, I jumped on the woman's foot, you're right up the top, he says. You're right, the little pair of pants there dropped in the top, little patch of hair, he said, and you were dead right, he said. It was that comfy, he said, I got in there, it was that comfy, he said, I dropped off sleep. He said, but when I woke up, when the bloke's mistake come